For decades, Genyornis was described as a monster bird. A thunderbird, a demon duck, a prehistoric brute towering over Ice Age Australia. But that story turns out was missing its most important detail. Because Genyornis wasn't built like a predator, it wasn't built like an emu, and it wasn't even built like the giant birds we thought we understood. Genyornis was something else entirely. A gigantic, flightless Giga-Goose. And once scientists finally saw its face, the entire story of how it lived and how it disappeared had to be rewritten. Genyornis lived in Australia during the Pleistocene epoch, roughly 40 to 50,000 years ago. It stood over 2 metres tall and weighed somewhere between 250 and 350 kilograms, as heavy as a small car on 2 powerful legs. It was the last surviving member of an ancient family of birds, the Dromornithidae, a lineage that had existed in Australia for more than 30 million years. These birds didn't arrive late. They were part of the continent's deep history, and Genyornis was the final chapter. For most of the 20th century, scientists had a problem. They had leg bones, they had fragments, they even had eggs. But they didn't have a complete skull, so Genyornis was reconstructed, based on its relatives, and those reconstructions leaned heavily towards something emu-like, or worse, something aggressive. But in 2024, that changed. A newly analysed, well-preserved skull revealed something unexpected. A bill that wasn't sharp, wasn't hooked, and wasn't built for tearing flesh. It was broad, mobile, and unmistakably goose-like, with a raised triangular casque and a jaw built for cropping and grinding vegetation. Genyornis suddenly looked less like a monster, and more like a highly specialised feeder. This wasn't just a cosmetic change. That skull tells us how Genyornis lived. The structure of the bill, combined with other adaptations, suggests it fed on aquatic plants, likely submerging its head-cropping vegetation along lake margins and wetlands. Even its ears and throat appear to have been protected for that purpose. In other words, Genyornis wasn't roaming dry plains at random. It was tied intimately to freshwater, and that detail changes everything. For millions of years, Australia's climate supported vast inland lakes, wetlands, and seasonal water bodies. Genyornis thrived in that world. But during the late Pleistocene, Australia began to dry. Lakes shrank, water became less reliable, and habitats fragmented. At Lake Callabonna in South Australia, one of the most important Genyornis fossil sites, evidence suggests a tragic final chapter. As the lake dried, birds became trapped in deep mud, developing bone infections, unable to escape. When the water finally vanished, so did their lifeline. This is also the period when humans arrived in Australia, and Genyornis is one of the very few megafauna species for which we have direct evidence of human interaction. Across hundreds of sites, archaeologists have found burnt eggshell fragments dated to tens of thousands of years ago. Chemical and protein analyses now strongly suggest these eggs belonged to Genyornis. They were placed on ember fires, heated deliberately and consumed, not hunted into oblivion, but exploited at a vulnerable point in their life cycle. And for a slow-breeding, habitat-specialised giant, that pressure didn't need to be extreme, to be devastating. This is where the old story fails. Genyornis didn't disappear because it was stupid or weak or doomed by humans alone. It disappeared because multiple pressures converged. Climate drying reduced freshwater habitats. Specialisation made adaptation difficult. And even modest egg harvesting may have pushed populations past recovery. Extinction in this case wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. Some Aboriginal rock art has been suggested to depict Genyornis, 2 massive birds etched into stone. Whether those images truly represent Genyornis remains debated, but the possibility matters because it reminds us that this wasn't deep time in the abstract. This was a world where people and giants shared the landscape. Genyornis wasn't a demon duck. It wasn't a prehistoric terror. It was a highly evolved, long-surviving giant perfectly adapted to a world that vanished beneath it. And when that world changed, faster than evolution could respond, even a 30 million year legacy can end. The lesson of Genyornis isn't about monsters. It's about fragility, specialisation, and how quickly balance can break. Australia didn't just lose a giant bird, it lost an entire way of life.